Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're back for another installment of the Bald Chef of Bergamo. Again, another beautiful fall morning. My wife's not feeling well. She got a little cold. She's made a special request to the Bald Chef of Bergamo for a soup. And I've showed you a number of soups on the YouTube channel, but now it's time to do something a little more hearty, a little more in line with the fall season. We're going to do an oxtail soup / beef barley soup. Get some oxtails from the butcher, augment it with a little bit of beef, and we'll make some beef barley soup from oxtail broth. So let's get inside there. Start seasoning and the oxtails. Got another bone to put with it. Go ahead and roast those up, and then we'll start the broth. Let's get inside and show you how it's done. Beautiful morning here in Bergamo. Let's get inside and start cooking. Okay, so inside here I got my Le Creuset pot, my standard soup pot, and I got some colda, some oxtails, and I've coated them with some flour, put a little salt and pepper on them, and as you can see in the corner over here I got a big soup bone. Went to the butcher and I said I needed some oxtails. We only had a little bit, and I said throw in what else if you have any other bones. A lot of people shy away from those, but they're really important. You know, go to your butcher. You can always just buy regular beef and make your soup, your beef barley soup, but go there and get some oxtails and some soup bones. They're cheap. They're cheaper than the standard beef, and you're going to make a great broth with them. So get them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this uncovered in the oven, about 400 degrees, 200 degrees centigrade, for about 20 minutes, just to kind of cook down, break up some of the juices and some of the fat that's in the bones here. And then I'm gonna add some water and then make a broth. So let's start with roasting, and we'll see what they look like after about 20 minutes at 400 degrees, and then we'll start making the broth. So I've roasted these oxtails and this bone for about 20-25 minutes at 400 degrees, 200 degrees centigrade. It's starting to get a nice little coating. Starting to break apart some of that fat, and now I'll add about 8 cups of water, and then bring this to a boil and just start cooking down these bones, starting to get a nice broth. And once we're done in about an hour, we'll kind of see where we are with this and see how the meat is cooking, how the broth is coming along, then we'll move on to the next step. So I pulled the oxtails out of the broth, let them cool off. As you can see, this bone's got a lot of marrow in there as well. I'm going to pull that off and put that into the soup when I go to cook it. There's a lot of flavor with this meat right near the bone, so let it cool off, and you're going to peel off all the meat from the bone, and we'll add that to the soup when it's time. I'll show you how to do that. The broth is sitting aside right now, cooling down. I'll skim off some of the fat because this oxtail does generate a lot of fat in the broth, so we'll skim off some of the fat, and then we'll add that to the soup. So because the oxtails don't have a lot of meat on them, I'm going to add about 3/4 to 1/2 pound of beef. You don't need anything special. I just got some cheap cut here. I'm going to dredge in some flour, and then I'm going to add it to the pan with the oil. And as you can see, this is the same pot I used to roast the oxtails. I want to keep all that flavor in there, get all that flavor, maintain the flavor, don't throw away flavor. So I'll let these sear, cook for a few minutes, take them out, and then I'll add the vegetables into this seared pan, and then we'll start the base of the soup as we go. Okay, so I've seared that beef. Got a good rich sear on that pan. It's going to generate a lot of flavor. And now I'm going to add a large potato, 2½ carrots, large white onion, 2 stalks of celery, and a nice little chunk of leeks, hearty, as the Italians say, and 3 cloves of garlic. Now I've got some oil in that pan. I'll I'll sweat these vegetables. It'll deglaze that pan a little bit. Then it'll be time to add back the broth, and then we'll let this thing cook. Once I get these cooked down, I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll go from there. So I sweat these vegetables, and as you can see, as they sweat and sauteed a little bit, they deglaze the pan. So I got all that flavor that I didn't lose, but I picked up from the vegetables sweating, put into the vegetables. Now I'm going to add the meat, the broth, and let it cook. And little Michelangelo, don't worry, you'll get to try some of this oxtail beef barley soup. So I've added the meat in and the broth, and I'm bringing it up to temperature now. And so then I'll add about 3/4 of a cup of the barley, farro. This is multi-grain, farro and barley. So I'll start to stir this in, bring this up to temperature, and then we will let it simmer for about an hour. Let the barley soften a bit, and then we'll taste it and see if we need to add any spices. But should be fine. You may need to add a little salt or pepper depending on where it is on the scale. But it looks nice and hearty, and we'll see how this turns. So here's the finished article. The beef barley soup based with an oxtail broth, and I've been saying that in this case I added farro, which is reality spelt, not barley, but just as good, maybe a little sweeter than the barley itself. But it's a very good hearty soup, full of vegetables. And let's see what Celeste thinks. Is it any good, Celeste?
Shake poco più bravo.
Ah, thank you. Buon appetito tutti. Hot eats and treats.